Hey guys, it's Darwin, and sometimes gear just fails on you. It breaks and just takes a crap on the trail, and sometimes you gotta change it up. Okay, so typically when I get done with a through hike, I like making a post-hike gear list, which is essentially the same thing as I made before I went on the through hike. But when I get back, I like to show you all the gear that I finished with, if I had any changes, and some of the failures that happened while I was on my through hike. Well, now that I'm back from my AZT through hike and my Scotland TGO challenge, I decided to do something a little bit different, and instead of doing that post-hike gear list, I figured I would just get down to the nitty-gritty and make a video talking about some of the gear failures that I had on both hikes and some of the changes that I made along the way. No sense in boring you with the same old gear list that you've probably already seen, and if you haven't checked those gear lists out, I'll put some links down below to both my AZT through hike gear list and my gear list for my Scotland TGO challenge. All right, so let's get into it. Right out of the gate on the Arizona Trail on day one, I had a pretty massive gear failure, and that was my Canon M50. Now the M50 is the camera that I chose to shoot all my YouTube videos with and work on the film with, getting some footage while I was on the trail. And on day one, my sensor actually went out on my camera. I have no clue what happened, but it just started throwing all these weird errors, telling me that the sensor wasn't working and I couldn't get it to turn on to take a shot, and that was on day one. Now, luckily, I met some trail angels on day one while I was starting, and they said in that first 100 miles, if I had any problems, to get a hold of them. And, well, I took them up on their offer, I got a hold of them, I shipped a new camera body to them, and they ended up coming and bringing it to me in Patagonia, Arizona. So right out of the gate, you know, it's not a piece of backpacking gear, but for me, this is a major piece of gear, especially because I make these videos for you guys, especially because I was working on that film. So the Canon M50 was definitely a massive failure, but with the new camera, I didn't have any problems all the way to the end of the trail, and I took the same camera on the TGO in Scotland, and it worked out pretty good. The next gear failure actually came maybe 2 days after the camera thing, and that was my filter. Now, the filter that I chose to take out on the Arizona Trail was the Sawyer Squeeze Micro. It's a new filter that Sawyer came out with last year, and I picked it up around PCT days. I ended up taking that out onto the Blue Ridge Parkway on my bike tour. It worked phenomenal. Took it on a bunch of day hikes and section hikes. It worked phenomenal. Got it out on the Arizona Trail, and on day two, it started clogging up like crazy. Couldn't get it to back flush. I couldn't get it to push any water out. It was barely just dripping. So when I got into the next town after Patagonia, I switched it out and I picked up the old trusty, tried and true Sawyer Squeeze that I've been using for years. Now, I really wanted the Sawyer Micro to be the new awesome go-to filter, and it even made my favorite gear of 2018 list last year. But going forward, I'm done with the mini, I'm done with the micro. I just think those smaller filters, they haven't figured out the flow rate yet. And if you're gonna buy Sawyer, buy the regular, buy the Squeeze. It only weighs like 2-point-something ounces. Look, if you're trying to shed a half an ounce on a filter, that's not worth it. Get the Squeeze, it works so much better. Regardless, all that being said, the Sawyer Micro was a pretty major gear failure for me. The third major piece of gear that failed on me was something that actually failed on me not only on the Arizona Trail, but also failed in Scotland on the TGO, and that were my stakes. Now, if you guys remember last year, I made a video talking about if I was gonna re-hike the PCT, some of the things that I would change about my hike, and one of the big things I would change is I typically use the titanium shepherd hook stakes, but out on the Arizona Trail, out on the PCT, you have really sandy, loose, pack kind of dirt. And these don't exactly hold that great of a grip, so I wanted to go with something with a bigger surface area. At the beginning of the year, I switched to the Z-Packs Carbon Core Stake, and I thought that they were gonna be great. I used them for the first time on the Arizona Trail, and in the first 2 weeks, I actually broke 2 of these. I actually still have one of them left. This one actually snapped straight in half. I had another one that broke here at the tip. And then when I was in Scotland, I had one that I actually drove this little metal tip right up into the carbon shaft of the stake. It could have been a little bit of my fault because I was using a rock every once in a while trying to hammer them into some of the hard ground out here in Arizona, but even in Scotland with the soft, wet, soggy ground, just pushing it in with the heel of my shoe, I still broke one. So going forward, I think that I'm done with the carbon stakes and I'm just gonna try something different. I don't know if it's the shepherd hooks that I'm gonna go back to. I might try a titanium V stake. I know a lot of people like those, but the carbon core stakes might not be the best choice for me because apparently I'm kind of rough on stakes. So massive gear failure on the carbon stakes. And then the fourth piece of major gear that failed on me on the trail was actually not on the Arizona trail at all. I used it really for the first time on the Arizona trail. It worked great for all 800 miles, but when I got to Scotland, I had a problem with my Z-Packs Plexamid tent. Now, you guys have been asking a lot of questions about this tent, and I will be doing a full-on gear review of this tent, so stay tuned for that. But I did have one failure with the tent. There was a night in Scotland where we were all camped around a lake. It got crazy windy and tents were blowing around and shaking, and one of my line locks actually broke in half on one of the tie-outs. Now, it wasn't the cord, it wasn't the webbing that's attached to the tent, it wasn't the stitching, it was the actual plastic line lock that snapped. So it snapped, my tent went down, it went all over me. I got kind of mad, I packed up all my stuff, and I kept hiking just to get out of the wind. The good thing is I ended up just taking my line off, tying it to the end of the tent, and using it without the actual line lock being able to pull it. Even though that was a failure, I'm still gonna continue to use this tent, and like I said, I will be doing a full 1,000 plus mile review now that I've put some mileage on this tent, so stay tuned for that. But in the long run, this was a gear failure. All right, so sometimes gear doesn't really fail on you on the trail, but you just want to switch things up. You decide that maybe the piece of gear that I chose isn't the best for what I'm doing and there's something out there that's better. So on the Arizona trail, I did make a handful of changes just to try something different. The first piece of gear that I changed on my Arizona trail thru hike that's different from my gear list was something that I actually picked up before I even started my thru hike, and that was the DJI Osmo Pocket. Now, I had been kicking around the idea of picking one of these up for quite a while. While Nemo and I were out on the trail doing our pre-hike filming, we were using a big stabilizing gimbal to get some real smooth shots of the trail, and we decided it would be really nice to have real smooth shots while we were doing the hike. So we decided to stop by an Apple store in Phoenix right before we started the hike, about 3 days before we started the hike, and we picked up this little guy. And I was pleasantly surprised with how well this worked. What I liked about it is I was able to get really nice, smooth shots of the trail, people hiking, some really nice panos. So this was a awesome change for me on the trail, and I liked it so much that I ended up taking it with me to Scotland and used it quite a bit in Scotland. Now, I will be doing a full-on review of this in the future, talking about how I think if you're gonna go out and do a thru hike, you're not looking to take a real big camera, you're wanting to take something a little bit nicer than a cell phone, this is a nice choice and really good for what it is. All right, the next piece of gear that I changed up about halfway through the Arizona trail was something that I picked up when I got off for 10 days. So I ended up getting off the AZT for 10 days because of some of the snow that was still up north, and I didn't want to jeopardize the film and all of the mud from the melting snow that was up on the rim, and I picked up a fanny pack. Now, for years, I have always used 2 pouches up here on my shoulder straps. I typically keep my camera in one, and then an extra lens, my phone, chapstick, headphones in another one, so I can quickly reach them. But I've been kind of dabbling in the idea of picking up a fanny pack for some time and hadn't really found one that I liked, hadn't found a design that I liked, but I finally decided to pull the trigger and pick up this guy, which is the Waymark Gear Company fanny pack. Just to try it out, try something different. I removed my straps from my shoulder pockets, and I was pleasantly surprised at how much more I like carrying this over having the straps. Number one, it doesn't get in the way. I don't have my big bulky camera sitting up here in a pouch. I'm able to put my camera, my microphone, my cell phone, I put my headphones, my chapstick, I put a lot of stuff in this. It was easily accessible right there on the front, and this guy made me a fanny pack fan. Something, again, that I've just been kind of never really got on the whole fanny pack bandwagon, but after using this on the trail, I really dig fanny packs. I ended up taking this over with me to Scotland as well and dug it the whole time over there. And the plus to having a fanny pack for me on both of those trips is when I went into a town and I didn't want to carry my pack around all day, I just put all of my main stuff in here and almost wear it like a side satchel or a, well, let's face it, a purse. So I really digged making this change, and I think going forward, I'm done with the little shoulder strap thing, and I think that I'm gonna rock a fanny pack. The next change that I made was actually between my thru hike of the Arizona Trail and my Scotland TGO challenge, and that was my shoes. So just before I started my Arizona Trail thru hike, I made a review of the Ultra Olympus, saying how much I love that shoe, and I do love that shoe. I used it for the entire length of the Arizona Trail, put a lot of miles on that shoe, and really dug it. But a shoe that has always really perked my interest was the Ultra Temp 1.5, and I could never really find them in my size when I was out on the PCT last year, so I decided to pick a pair up just to try them on the TGO challenge, and I really dug this shoe. What I like about it is it kind of sits in this middle ground between the Lone Peak, which is the shoe that I used to wear, and the Ultra Olympus, which is the shoe that I now wear. So you kind of have this middle cushion. It's not too much cushion, it's not too little a cushion. Plus, it has, I think, one of the widest toe box of any Ultra shoe. And you guys probably know me, I have to have a wide toe box. So I really dug this shoe. Now at this point, I only have about 300 miles on the shoe and probably don't have enough miles on these shoes to really give a full review of them, but it is coming soon. I'm gonna do a lot more hikes with these, test them out, wear my Ultra Olympus, wear these, and see kind of which one that I like better. And I will be doing a full review, but that was a massive change that I made between the AZT and the TGO. All right, guys, the last big change that I made in my gear list between the AZT and TGO was something that I have gotten a ton of questions about, tons of comments, you guys asking, what was wrong with your Waymark through 40? Why did you switch your pack between both hikes? Why did you go back to your Z-Pax Nero? And that's the gear that I changed, was my Z-Pax Nero. So the pack that I used for the end of the PCT and then the pack that I used for the entire AZT was my Waymark through 40. And before going over to Scotland, I made kind of a last minute decision and decided to switch back to my Z-Pax Nero, a pack that I've used over the years. And you know, the reason I switched wasn't because there was anything wrong with my through 40, it was just because I wanted to switch it up, wanted to do something different. I like using different gear on different hikes just to test it out, and I hadn't used it in so long, I kind of wanted to compare it. I'd been using the Waymark pack for so long, I wanted to throw this on and see, oh, does the Nero still work for me? And the answer was, yeah. They're both great packs. They both work phenomenal. I don't know if I would tell anyone to pick one over the other. It really all depends on you. It's all a personal preference. Yeah, that's why I switched the pack. There wasn't anything wrong with my through 40. I'm not going back to this full time. And I don't think that I really like one over the other, but that is why I made that gear change in my list. All right, guys, I think that's it. I think that's basically all the gear failures and all the changes that I made between those two hikes, which is pretty good for me. I typically have a lot more failures and typically do a lot more changes on a through hike, but that was it. What's some gear that has recently failed on you while you're on a hike? What's some gear that you decided to recently change up just to try something different? Leave me something down below and let me know your thoughts. If you found any value in this video, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.